So let's take a look at what's happening out there. We got Kristi Noem is getting into it right now.
This is a way to ensure whether
Here's
it's North Carolina or California or anywhere in between, that the American people can know that you are not playing politics with disaster assistance.
Yes, Senator, I'll work with you and this committee to make sure I'm following the federal law and ensuring that you have information and transparency from us and from DHS and FEMA.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yield back.
Senator Langford.
Governor Noem, great to see you.
Great to see you too.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for accepting this nod that the president has given you. For Brian, thanks. But
this guy was responsible for that terrible border deal.
I've had the privilege of knowing you for a very long time since we served together in the House of Representatives. So I have the benefit of knowing how your qualifications and how strong you are in all these background issues and how hard you work on these things, because I've seen it firsthand. So I appreciate you stepping into this, because a lot of attention across the country will be focused on this. You know that full well, and you've stepped into it. For Governor Landry, my state and many folks in my state are praying for you and for your state. You've done a great job in leadership at this moment in a very, very tough time for Louisiana. And we don't want to see acts of terrorism anywhere in our country. And it's incredibly difficult days for a governor. So thanks for your leadership on that as well. I also have to tell you, Kristi, I've whined to my wife occasionally about the temperature that's coming on Monday. I'm very excited about Trump's inaugural, but we're all going to be sitting outside in about 12 degrees. And I thought just for fun, I would check South Dakota on Monday. It's 1 for a high.
Yeah, for a high.
And
That's
so
cold,
I'm going to stop whining about the temperature Monday
that's
here in
cold.
Washington, D.C. on it. I'm going to run through a couple of things here because I know you. Not everybody in Oklahoma knows you. The questions that I get from people, though, in Oklahoma, I want to be able to run past you because they want to be able to know the answer to these things. So I'm just going to blitz through a whole bunch of them. Will you use the legal authority that DHS already has to be able to close our border?
Yes, Senator. I will work with President Trump to ensure that we're securing our border.
Thank you. There's a lot of things that this Congress needs to do, has already been mentioned by Senator Slotkin as well, that we need to do to be able to close loopholes, to be able to give you additional authority. But there's a tremendous amount of authority currently not being used. In Oklahomans are saying, is that about to be used? And they'll be grateful to be able to hear that. No other president has ever created a phone app to be able to facilitate a faster processing of aliens in, called the CBP-1 app. It's been mentioned several times here. Will you use your authority to stop facilitating faster processing of illegal aliens into our country with the CBP-1 app?
Yes, Senator. We will eliminate the CBP-1 app, maintain some of the data that's in it that's critical to knowing who's in our country, but that app will no longer be in use.
Thank you. No other president has ever used the parole authority, just in general, humanitarian parole, to facilitate faster processing of aliens into our country, which leads to the catch and release we've all heard about. So the Oklahomans that I talk to say, are we about to end the abuse of parole and end catch and release? Is that about to stop?
Senator, President Trump's been very clear that he will end catch and release.
Terrific. Folks want to know, will you use your authority with the funds that are given to you by Congress to actually build more wall rather than use the funding that's given to you, as the Biden administration did, to do environmental remediation
and then to
around
sell
the border
the wall,
rather than actual border wall and border structure?
Yeah. Senator, President Trump has been clear that he wants to build the wall.
So do we. So will you use your authority to be able to scan more vehicles? And obviously, we've got to get you the funding to be able to do this, to be able to scan more vehicles and individuals that are carrying fentanyl into our country through our ports of entry.
Yes, Senator. We will continue to use technologies, but hopefully be able to use more with the resources that we're granted to scan those vehicles and know what's coming in and out of this country.
Last year, FEMA employees during disaster relief were instructed by one of their supervisors that if they see a Trump sign or a Trump flag flying, to skip that house, to not stop by there and tell them what their federal government can do for them.
Yeah.
Will you allow FEMA employees or any within DHS to politicize their role and to pick and choose who gets help and who doesn't as an American?
Senator, under President Trump's administration, disaster and emergency relief will not be handed out with political bias. Every American will be responded to and treated equally.
That's what folks want to know. Will you review the Secret Service responsibilities to be able to go back through it and to say, are they focused on their primary mission, or is there something that could distract? Secret Service still chases down financial crimes. They're still chasing down child exploitation. Those are serious things for Treasury or for FBI to do. But there's a question is if that's the first priority for Secret Service.
Senator, the Secret Service is in need of dramatic reforms. They do have a protective detail element that is their priority, and also an investigation side. My understanding is that that investigation side is often used to train the protective detailed officers, but clearly they are not focusing on what their true duty is, and it needs to get back onto what they were created for, and that was the protective detail mission and emergency situations that they need to help plan and prepare for and defend.
Thank you. This committee made a request to the Secretary of Homeland Security last year, and by the way, also the head of the FBI, to be able to come before this committee and to do what every Secretary of Homeland Security has done for the last 20 years, every single year, unbroken until last year. And then the Secretary refused to come before this committee in an open session and talk about national threats. Now, the former chairman protested strongly to the Biden administration and DHS. They weren't coming, but they still refused to be able to come. Will you come before this committee and talk about the threats openly so the American people can hear them in a public forum?
Yes, Senator Peters and I discussed this quite a bit in our meeting as well, and I have committed to come and give that briefing to this committee and to the American people.
Thank you. We need that. Let me tell you another challenge we've had with Homeland Security in the past 4 years. When we ask for data and for information, we get, I'll get back to you on that. When we ask again and again and again and again, we get the same statement. I'll get back to you on that. Now, I can go down the street to the command center where they actually get the data in live and they have it up on big screens and they're tracking exactly what's happening on the southern border to the minute. But if I ask for what happened last month, they'll say, we're still gathering that data. We're not asking for anything other than what Congress is supposed to get. That's the ability to be able to see data and to have real oversight over DHS. And that has been a failure of this DHS, along with multiple other issues on that. When we request the data for basic things like how many special interest aliens were allowed across the border, if it was last year, we had to find out on our own. It was 70,000 people that were targeted by this administration as a potential national security risk, that were not just found at the border, that were released when they were found at the border. 70,000 people just from last year in the country right now that this administration declared at the border, they're a potential national security risk.
Let them go.
Now, I know you're not going to do that.
How many people
but when we ask for the data and for the information, when we say, how's the National Vetting Center working? Do you have the connection between it to be able to screen individuals there? We're just doing our oversight responsibility. You've served in Congress before and did a great job on that and did oversight. We want to still be able to do the same thing. Will you provide data to this committee so that we can cooperate with you to help?
Senator, I will follow the law and be transparent with you and allow you to do the due diligence towards oversight that you are tasked with.
I have absolutely no doubt about that, Governor. I have absolutely no doubt. Looking forward to you serving in that role. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm still mad at Langford for him being responsible for that crap border bill that they tried to shove down our gullets right in the middle of an election. It was very offensive and it neutered our border arguments.
I think a lot of Americans, including some conservatives, misunderstand the First Amendment. They think the First Amendment says that Facebook has to publish my opinion, or the Wall Street Journal has to publish my opinion, or we need to force them to be fair. That's not what the First Amendment's about at all. The First Amendment really doesn't apply to telling private companies what we can or cannot say. YouTube censored me, and I despise their policy. They actually took down speeches I made on the floor. But really, I don't have a legal recourse other than I can complain about YouTube being unfair and not hosting, both sides of an issue. However, with the government, though, there is a rule. The First Amendment specifically says Congress shall pass no law banning or abridging speech. And this is what really got us worried about, what not only the FBI was doing, but the Department of Homeland Security.
Yes.
Actually meeting with these companies on a weekly basis. And imagine the chilling effect of this. Imagine that there are cameras here, that they're going to end their filming of this interview and then decide, well, what she said or what he said really was misinformation and we should edit that out. Can you imagine? It's just hard for me to imagine that the media has not, which once defended the First Amendment, hasn't been in more of an uproar over the government meeting with the media to decide things. Some of this we didn't know, and then Elon Musk bought Twitter. people asked him, they said, well, you've paid $44 billion for Twitter. Isn't that too much? And he said, I paid $44 billion to defend free speech.
Worth
It's
it.
been an amazing
Thanks, Elon.
service, not only to open up the forum to more viewpoints, but to point out what the government was doing. In this last week, we heard from Mark Zuckerberg, who said that the pushiness, the coerciveness of government meeting with them was unprecedented, and that they pushed back. But he also said worse than them just sort of telling him he should restrict speech, they also threatened him.
Yeah.
They threatened to come after him through antitrust law. They threatened to remove parts of, Section 230 of the liability protection. Just to imagine this bully nature of government.
Disgusting.
And I know you're opposed to that, but if you're confirmed and you're in a position of saying, we're just no longer sending people to meet with media. And the way I describe it is to talk about constitutionally protected speech, because some will say, oh, well, what about, pornography, or what about child trafficking? Those are illegal. Those are not constitutionally protected speech. You have every ability to meet with that. But for constitutionally protected speech, will you tell us in America that you will no longer be sending government agents to meet with the media?
Yes, Senator, I'll work with you to ensure that civil rights and liberties are protected and that we are not in the misinformation and disinformation space like the current DHS is.
Nice.
The only other thing
Get
I would
out.
ask on this basis is we will send requests. We sent requests previously, sometimes and often bipartisan requests for information. The Twitter files, Michael Schellenberger, Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss did a great job of showing what was happening in Twitter and how they were cooperating with government. I think the other investigation that needs to occur is who were the people in government they were talking to? Do they still work at DHS? And can we make sure that they're not in a position of authority? And this is not something I'm going to tell you to do. It's just a request that you have your own investigation, that you have people who work for DHS to say, we're going to look for people who are bringing their political bias to work and trying to influence speech and restrict speech based on their bias. And help us in rooting that out and making sure that these people never again have that responsibility, because I think that I don't think there's ever been anything like this as far as the restriction of speech. And I think the election is largely going to stop and tilt things the other way. But will you help us by looking internally for those who are trying to restrict speech?
Senator, I look forward to working with you on that mission.
I don't have any other questions now, but I think Senator Peters and Senator Blumenthal, and we'll see how it goes. We're going to start with Senator Peters with one more 5-minute round.
All right. So interesting. I am very curious if anybody's going to ask her today about Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, which was the DHS is basically FBI law enforcement contingent. And we know that there were dozens, if not hundreds, of HSI people there on January 6th, or other government aligned folks. And the Proud Boys trial judge didn't allow any of that evidence to come into court because the case was not being prosecuted by Homeland. It was only being prosecuted by the DOJ and the FBI. And so the judge said, well, it's out of scope. It's not relevant. They don't need it. They're not using it. It wasn't part of disclosure, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, we know there were dozens of other agents there. So hopefully Kristi Noem either gets a question about that or helps to uncover who those individuals were who were there in the J6 scam embedded, creating what happened. So, all right, we'll keep our eye on Kristi Noem.